Scotland has contributed many authors and poets to world literature, chief among them being the ploughman poet Robert Burns. His fellow countryman, Robert Louis Stevenson, himself a poet and author of classic novels such as Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, wrote an essay in tribute to Robert Burns and his contributions to the evolution of world literature, as he helped to lay the foundations for the impassioned writings of the Romantics and the stark social commentary of the Realists. I'd like to read an excerpt from Stevensons' essay, since nothing says more about an author than the accolades of his colleagues. At a time when the poet made his appearance and great first success, his work was remarkable in two ways. First, in an age when poetry had become abstract and conventional, instead of continuing to deal with shepherds, thunderstorms, and personifications, he dealt with the actual circumstances of his life, however matter-of-fact and sordid these might be. And second, in a time when English versification was particularly stiff, lame, and feeble, and words were used with ultra-academic timidity, he wrote verses that were easy, racy, graphic, and forcible, and used language with absolute tact and courage as it seemed most fit to give a clear impression. There was no ambiguity in Burns. His work was at the pole opposite from indefinite and stammering performances. Yet Burns, like many great artists, proceeded from a school and continued a tradition, only the school and tradition was Scots and not English. While the English language was becoming daily more pedantic and inflexible, and English letters more colorless and slack, there was another dialect in the sister country, and a different school of poetry, tracing its descent through King James I from Chaucer. The dialect alone accounts for much, for it was then written colloquially, which kept it fresh and supple, and although not shaped for heroic flights, it was a direct and vivid medium for all that had to do with social life. And so if Burns helped to change the course of literary history, it was by his frank, direct, and masterly utterance, and not by his homely choice of subjects. He wrote from his own experience, because it was his nature to do so, and the tradition of the school from which he proceeded was fortunately not opposed to homely subjects. But these homely subjects he communicated the rich commentary of his nature. They were all steeped in Burns, and they interest us not in themselves, but because they have been passed through the spirit of so genuine and vigorous a man. Such is the stamp of living literature, and there was never any more alive than Burns. His humor comes from him in a stream so deep and easy that I will venture to call him the best of humorous poets. He turns about in the midst to utter a noble sentiment or a trenchant remark on human life, and the style changes and rises to the occasion. Burns was so full of his identity that it breaks forth on every page, and there is scarce an appropriate remark either in praise or blame of his own conduct, but he has put it himself into verse. Alas for the tenor of these remarks! They are indeed his own pitiful apology for so marred an existence and talents so misused and stunted. And they seem to prove forever how small a part is played by reason in the conduct of man's affairs. Here was one, at least, who with unfailing judgment predicted his own fate, yet his knowledge could not avail him, and with open eyes he must fulfill his tragic destiny. 10 years before the end, he had written his epitaph, and neither subsequent events nor the critical eyes of posterity have shown us a word in it to alter. And lastly, has he not put in for himself the last unanswerable plea? Then gently scan your brother man, still gentler sister woman. Though they may gang a ken and wrang, to step aside is human. One point must still be greatly dark. 1. Alas, I fear every man and woman of us is greatly dark to all their neighbors, from the day of birth until death removes them, in their greatest virtues as well as their saddest faults. And we, who have been trying to read the character of Burns, may take home the lesson and be gentle in our thoughts.